It's really great to be able to see everybody here today in person. I'd like to welcome everyone to the James A. Baker Institute for Public Policy and the 2023 International Space Medicine Summit. This summit's been going on since 2007, and as you know, for the last couple of years, due to COVID, we've not been able to meet. And this year is going to be a blended meeting where you're here and a lot of the panelists are here, but we have a large number of individuals that'll be online. I would like to thank the staff at the Baker Institute, all of the staff that have worked this, and the audiovisual folks, and the interpreters that are going to be translating into from English and Russian. And when we have Russian speakers, there are headsets you can wear out here. I'd also like to thank all of the people on the planning committee and the panelists that are going to be participating, and also the sponsors. There's the old quote in the space program, "No bucks, no Buck Rogers," and it really helps to have support for this meeting. This is an important meeting, and it's always had high-level discussions with multiple nations and the spacefaring nations involved. And I think there's a good reason for this, is that human spaceflight is really important. There are going to be many benefits from spaceflight that will be discussed in the first panel, actually, for exploration and also for improvement of human condition on Earth. But the space program is also unique, and it's the only program that gives us the ability to become a multiplanetary species. This is the only one. And everyone's heard the quote from Tsiolkovsky that the Earth is a cocoon, but we can't live forever in a cocoon, and eventually we're going to be going out into our solar system. And this was a long, long time ago. More recently, John Young, those of you who know him, was known as a person of not too many words, but later on was known for his memos and quite a bit of words. But he said that single planet species just don't survive. And he used the word we, but the space program is in the deadly serious business of saving the species. And so the kind of things that we do, both on the things that are going to benefit the Earth, but also to give us geographic diversity for human presence, is really important. And even after 62 years after Gagarin's flight, space flight remains very challenging, and the environment is very unforgiving, and we've paid a fairly high price at times for that. The quote about the space flight is that one strike and you're out, that when things happen, they can be catastrophic. And there are new challenges that continue to emerge. It's been wonderful to have more sensitive equipment on the International Space Station for doing diagnostic type studies and research studies. But one of the things is we found out that we'd missed a few things over those 50 years that are affecting humans, and we were truly designed to be at 1G. And going into space has some real challenges that remain. Wernher von Braun, 10 years before Gagarin's flight, said it will not be the engineering problems, but rather the limits of the human frame that make that final decision as to whether human spaceflight will eventually become a reality. Well, now we know it did become a reality, and humans were able to do it. Yet the challenges for going to Mars and all of the unique things about exploration, there's a lot we don't know. The Human Research Program has a lot of areas that are still red, but things such as, we have almost no experience now in partial gravity of either the Mars or the Moon. We have a little bit on the Moon. They have just an altered 24-hour day cycle. We evolved with a 24-hour day. We have almost no knowledge of working with regolith and dust that you encounter on the Moon or on Mars. The particulate radiation, even in low Earth orbit, we don't get quite the radiation we get from the galactic cosmic radiation. We have very little data on that. And actually, one of the things I think is still a major deal is this is Mother Earth, and we've never left it with it in our rear view mirror and going to be gone for 3 years or so, and where you can't have any direct conversations with anyone on Earth. And all of the pleasures and all of the things that we've enjoyed on Earth, they're not going to be there. And these are going to be very difficult. And then my area is reproduction. And truthfully, if we're eventually going to become a multiplanetary species, we're going to someday, particularly when we can shield from radiation, are going to have to start working on human reproduction and reproduction of animals and other things in space. The International Space Medicine Summit, I really like, is unique. And since Mr. Abbey isn't here, and you probably noticed that this talk is usually given by an ambassador or Mr. Abbey, and due to my lack of athletic ability, am very used to coming off of the bench to go play in the next player up scenario. And that's kind of been my experience with athletics. But Mr. Abbey couldn't get a hall pass from his doctors for today, but he will be here tomorrow. And as you know, right now with worldwide situation, ambassadors are kind of hard to come by. And so you are stuck with me. But this meeting was started in 2007. And it was really, it underscores the importance of space medicine and as a field. And I had a chance to meet Oleg Gazinko back in the early 90s and work with his wife in certifying certain individuals for space flight. And he said that space medicine bears a great responsibility to both history and humanity. And it's that type of seriousness that this meeting addresses. And I like competition. If I'm in a race with you, I'd like to beat you in the race. And competition can improve performance. But when you look at programs like the International Space Station, or you look at programs like going to Mars, it's much better when the spacefaring nations cooperate and they work together, because they're so expensive and they're so large programs that cooperation is very important. And that was from the very beginning of this conference what George wanted. He wanted this to include all of the spacefaring nations. And that particularly at that time was the United States and Russia. And there's still great involvement both from the United States and Russia, but also now the international partners and other countries. And he's made quite a bit of effort to try to be inclusive with China. I know Leroy Chow, who's on our planning committee, has worked very hard on that. We've had a little bit of success in that area, but including all of the spacefaring nations has been an important part of this. The other thing that he did that I think is unique and I really like is this isn't scientists and doctors alone. This is the team of individuals that support spaceflight. Yes, the doctors and the biomedical engineers and the scientists are very important, but it also includes astronauts who are not in those areas. It includes the controllers, engineers, and even managers. You know, you have to have managers that understand these sort of things to make right decisions that affect us. And so it was inclusive of all of those. And we're going to have some PowerPoint presentations today, so I'm not going to beat up on PowerPoint too much. But also, the format of this meeting, I think, has been unique. That they wanted it to have panelists who were experts in their field, where they could present their data, but also interact with the other panelists and the moderators, but more importantly, interact with the experts that are sitting out in these seats, because a lot of times the experts in these seats are just as good as the ones on the panels. And so, and one other just minor thing is that we weren't constrained by all of the constraints and the minutiae of continuing medical education. It would be nice, I guess, for doctors to get CME, but those requirements are so onerous that we have a freedom to really put into the program what works. And I think a great deal of credit for this meeting and for this deal needs to go, and you need to remember Mr. Abbey and Bobby Alford from Baylor, who started this, and it continues. The next two speakers, I'll mention one other thing. This program, I think, it's been a little bit hard to put together this year. I think the program is outstanding. I think you're going to find some panels that are just wonderful to listen to and learn from and to feed back to. I'm not going to go through them because they're in your program, but I think it's a really good program. But these things can't happen without some support. And I want to mention over the years, and Bobby Alford and Baylor and Jeff Sutton have been huge in supporting this, and also more recently, Texas A&M University. The next two speakers, and they're going to be reversed in order from what's in your program. The first one is Jeff Sutton from Baylor. He's the director for the Center for Space Medicine there, and he's a professor of medicine at Baylor. He's the Friedkin Chair of Research in Systems Integration in Space Medicine, and he's chair of the board of the Translational Research Institute for Space Health, and 20 years as the director of the National Space Biomedical Research Institute. Following Jeff will be Dr. Bonnie Dunbar. Of course, she's an astronaut, and she's the professor and John and B. Slattery Chair of Aerospace Engineering at Texas A&M University, and the director of the Aerospace and Human Systems Laboratories and the Centrifuge Lab. So Jeff, if you'll come up.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Richard. I think you did a great job in kicking off the summit this year. And on behalf of the Center for Space Medicine at Baylor College of Medicine, I want to welcome all of you to ISMS 2023. Baylor College of Medicine, as mentioned, has been really pleased to collaborate with the Baker Institute for Public Policy on every ISMS meeting since the very beginning. I remember meeting with Mr. Abbey and Dr. Alford back in 2006 when we were planning the very first summit. And this year's hybrid meeting promises to be both informative and I think enjoyable. So we're very appreciative of you taking time to attend the summit. We know that you have busy schedules, and extend a warm welcome to our international colleagues and of course to our students. We're really thrilled with all of your participation. And we also acknowledge the Baker Institute for their generosity in allowing us to hold the summit once again in this beautiful and inspirational setting. So as been the tradition, there's an interesting mix of panels, as Richard mentioned, and they reflect past experiences as well as future directions and opportunities. I also want to thank in advance all of the moderators and panelists, and give a special shout out to Mr. Abbey, who indeed remains the driving and inspirational force behind the summit. And as always, Mr. Abbey, you have our gratitude and appreciation. So I hope all of you have a rewarding meeting, and I hand things over to Bonnie.
Well, thank you very much, and welcome on behalf of Texas A&M University. We've been a sponsor since 2016, but Texas A&M University's involvement, of course, goes way back to the beginning of the space program in terms of both research and workforce development. We have a tremendously committed Chancellor, John Sharp, in ensuring that our university is involved in the future of exploration, return to the moon, and on to Mars. He has so said at several different venues over the years, and you'll hear in a little bit from Dr. Rob Ambrose about our most recent venture into supporting space exploration. Joining us virtually today is Dr. Sue Bloomfield. Some of you may remember she's been on a panel, but she was very much involved in some of the bone research that I was aware of when I was at NASA, and is currently I think, retired, still very much involved in what we're doing. We have some students here. We also have some research ventures that we are involved in, and some of our faculty is here, especially in aerospace medicine and enlarging our capability in human physiology. It says engineering up there, but it's really the whole university that's involved. And I want to thank Richard for taking the helm. It's more than a bench. He was head of flight medicine when for a couple of my flights. He was my flight surgeon when I trained in Russia in 1994 and 95, which was our first step back in a partnership since Apollo-Soyuz. And that was a great learning experience, and that partnership grew through what we called Phase 1 to what we have now is the International Space Station. And I want to thank also for Dr. Sutton for all of the collaboration we've had over the years. I had the opportunity to be on the board of the NSBRI when it was the NSBRI and to interact with Trish, and we've been doing some of that as well. So I welcome you on behalf of Texas A&M. We look forward to a long and more productive relationship in the future as we do both workforce development for all the positions in engineering and medicine and physiological research, as well as some major new initiatives that will take place over the next few years. So we changed the order a little bit so I could introduce the next speaker, who's also from Texas A&M. And I would like to call Dr. Rob Ambrose up here, if he's here, so he could just, so I see him as I introduce him. Some of you from NASA may recognize Dr. Ambrose. He's not wearing his badge. He is currently the professor of mechanical engineering and a chair there for the J. Mike Walker Chair. We stole him from NASA, by the way. He's a member of the National Academy of Engineering. He's director for space and robotics at Texas A&M. He's affiliated with my department in aerospace engineering and electrical and computer engineering. He has his mechanical engineering degree from the University of Texas, his PhD. His MS and BS are both from Washington University in St. Louis. Rob has multiple awards and has a wonderful mix of industry experience with government experience and now with academics. But I think among the awards that he might want us to mention, I hope, is the most recent award, which was announced by through Texas A&M University, and that is that he's the 2023 recipient of the Charles Russ Richards Memorial Award from the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. Rob is most well known for some of the robotics that you've seen, Robonaut being one of them, Robotic Glove, the rovers. If you visit Lone Star Flight Museum, you'll see one of the rovers there. And so we look forward to a really productive future with Rob as we explore with both humans and robotics and look at the intersection of both of those. So with that, I introduce Rob.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for having me here today. The real purpose of my talk is going to be just to share with you some of the new initiatives that Texas A&M has underway that Dr. Dunbar mentioned and alluded to. Maybe continuing the theme, I'm also second string. First string in this new effort is Dr. Nancy Curry-Gregg, but we've got a lot of outreach that we're doing right now, and so we're kind of doing a divide and conquer. Nancy, I had the pleasure of working with her at the Johnson Space Center in multiple different capacities over my career, and she was one of the people that even recruited me to come to A&M, and it's been a pleasure getting to work with her and Bonnie and all the other folks. It's a great team working in space. And I just want to say one other thing about that. Texas A&M has been excelling in space long before Rob Ambrose showed up. The number of National Academy members that are doing active space research is really pretty phenomenal, and all sorts of research. A recent analysis that we did of our kind of space footprint at A&M showed over 300 faculty in 12 different colleges doing space relevant research. And I think I might have met like maybe 10% of them, maybe. It's really staggering how large A&M is, but in particular in space. So one of my goals for this new Texas A&M Institute is to try and get a bunch of those folks together, and then of course get them together with the rest of the world. And I think when you get folks together like that, good things happen. All right, so with that, let me tell you a little bit about the background of where we are. There was a very active session in Austin about back before they started trying to impeach each other. They were pretty productive, had one of the best sessions ever, and things haven't been as productive lately, but what a great session. And there were a number of major initiatives for the long-term benefit of the state. You may have heard about the U.S. CHIPS Act. The Texas legislature passed a Texas version of the CHIPS Act that's quite large and focused on making sure Texas remains in its leadership role in semiconductor manufacturing. Little known space fact. Back in the 60s, NASA purchased more than 90% of the integrated circuits that were being manufactured worldwide. We didn't invent the microchip, but when you are buying 90% of them, you kind of are leading the charge, and they gave a contract to a little startup company called Texas Instruments. And that's how space can really drive things, and I'm proud to see how Texas is continuing to work in that area. But they also decided they really wanted to go after space, and we had some conversations with leadership about where are we right now, and what are the opportunities, and what does the community need. And the big sea change here is turning to surface exploration, and the facilities and the missions themselves are very different when you're going to a surface. Gravity is kind of a big deal, and it totally changes the way you move people around, the way you move payloads and logistics, the kinds of science that you do, and the other kinds of commercial operations that are possible on a surface that are different from in orbit. So yes, there's a lot going on. There's some changes. With change is opportunity to kind of lose it, where some other state might step up. It's a competitive world, or the opportunities to reinvigorate what we have going and charge into some new directions. So House Bill 3447 was passed in May, signed by the governor in early June, and it really set up two things. It set up a Space Exploration and Aeronautics Research Fund with $150 million that's in the bank right now, and then directly allocated $200 million to a new facility that they've asked A&M to build, and I'm going to tell you more about that. But this isn't just kind of a one-and-done thing. So they also created a new commission called the Texas Space Commission, and there are a lot of commissions in the state. The governor's office runs these commissions, and of all the commissions that have ever existed in the state of Texas, more people were nominated for this one than any other commission, including oil, agriculture, and all the other big aspects of our economy in Texas. There's a lot of energy here in space, and incredible interest. So the commission is structured for the long term. There will be 3 members nominated from the governor's office, lieutenant governor, and speakers. Those 9 form kind of the board of directors of this commission, and their major most important product is putting together a master plan for what the state needs in the subsequent biennium session. So that plan is due at the end of each biennium, due to the governor's office on December 31st, and it should chart out what should be done by the legislature in the next session. So think about what that means. That is going to drive a future investment, and we have every reason to believe that in the next biennium there will be another $350 million set for this, if that plan is worthy. If that plan has $350 million worth of great ideas, things that should be invested in by the state, we have every belief that the next biennium will pick that charge up. So that plan is really important, and if you were to just kind of close your eyes and think about what might be in that plan, it should include some things that Texas is already the leader in. And space medicine is one of those. If you consider other regions of the country that have vigorous space programs, not too many of them focus on medicine. So, this is one of the crown jewels in the, what is Texas space, is space medicine. So I would expect to see a big chunk of that plan involving space medicine. And of course, human space exploration more generally. Again, Texas, well known for its human space program. And so I would expect to see doubling down on those areas of strength. We also across the state have quite a substantial aerospace manufacturing capacity. It's not as much in Houston, but in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, it's quite substantial. And then connecting into all the universities around the state, as many professors we have at A&M doing space research, I have to admit we're not the only ones in the state. And if you look, our universities are nicely spread around the state, kind of where our people are. And we've got people that would be great to engage all around the state. So I would like to invite you to help us with that plan. And we're looking to get started. The commissioners have not all been named, but I think getting some initial ideas moving would be smart. And so we've been holding some workshops to try and get some input from the community. The second organization that they created in House Bill 3447 is this consortium. It's a research consortium that is somewhat similar to the commission, but in addition to a couple appointees from the governor, lieutenant governor, and House Speaker, they also allocated some slots for 3 universities. So there's the president of Rice, the chancellor of UT, and the chancellor of Texas A&M all have a membership position on the executive committee. So there are 9 executive committee members or their designee to participate on that consortium. And in the language of the law, it says that they can hire Texas A&M to help manage the consortium. And our model for that is somewhat similar to a consortium that A&M manages for the Pentagon for hypersonics research. And in that one, A&M doesn't get the most money. We help manage it, but I think right now Purdue and Georgia Tech are getting more hypersonics fund out of the consortium that we manage than A&M is, and the leadership at A&M is firewalled from the review of those proposals, and we think that's the right way to do it. And so we're likely to model the way we help this consortium on some of the lessons we've had doing other consortiums in the area. So we're very excited to be a part of this. We're hearing some rumblings from the governors and lieutenant governors and speaker's office that they're making some progress on selecting, going through this pretty long list of people who would like to be involved and getting us the 9 commissioners and the additional 6 members of the executive committee for the consortium that we'll need. And here are just some actually kind of funny photos. I met with the UT chancellor and president, and I, as Dr. Dunbar mentioned, I did my PhD at UT, and apparently they still let me into the building there. It was kind of nice at the UT Systems building. We were there meeting with Vanessa Weiss, who's the center director for the Johnson Space Center, and D.T. Thompson, who's at the time was the vice commander for U.S. Space Force. And then we went over and we met with the governor, and he did a pretty strong pitch for why Texas needs to be involved in space, and it was great to hear. So we're moving, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about the building now. So of the $350 million, $150 set aside for a research trust fund, $200 to get busy on a new building, and we decided we couldn't wait. With this move to the surface, we really don't have a good facility in the area. We've been talking to NASA about it for quite a while. They really want a surface facility for doing design and development of surface systems for the moon, training of astronauts and testing of the equipment, training the ops team. And they realized it takes like 10 years to get in line to build a building in the federal government. And so we're going to try and build this building in 2 years. And I love NASA. This is I'm allowed to make jokes about NASA because I work there. I think in 2 years we might have come up with the acronym that named the building. So we're moving, and they're counting on A&M and the state. So this is a beautiful kind of partnership. The state puts this money all up front, and again, trying to schedule a big bolus of money all up front is really hard for the federal government. But then the federal government does have long-term use. So they're in all the planning. So we're trying to fit together this upfront surge of funds from the state with the long-term use funds that NASA will have, and that's a great partnership. So we're fortunate at the same time to have a leader at JSC who really wants to kind of open the place up. She recognizes that the future missions aren't just going to be the government, all kinds of stakeholders. So see that big chunk of land on the west side of JSC there, she set aside 240 acres for organizations to lease. And so she put that call out in June. We turned in a proposal in July to lease 32 acres, kind of the corner lot down there, ironically right next to the Longhorns that are right there on number 4, next to Rocket Park. There's some symmetry in that. And so we turned that lease in. I'm very happy with the progress we've made in just the last week on this lease. We got notes back from them saying they wanted to accept our lease, and we've been negotiating, and the terms of that lease will be taken to the Board of Regents next week if things go well, and I'm cautiously optimistic that we're going to close this deal. 32 acres is a big chunk of land, and that's because it's a big building that we're proposing. So let me show you just a couple artist renditions or artist renderings of what this building might look like. And don't hold me to any of these, because we're working with the architects to figure out how far we can make $200 million go, but I'm optimistic it can go quite far. So here's kind of a overview of the facility, and those are two very large scapes. There's a moonscape and a Marsscape. At the Johnson Space Center, I was responsible for the JSC rock yard. And so when I started working on this as a civil servant, one of my goals was to put my rock yard out of business. And for whatever reason, I always spent most of my time out there in August. And it was brutal. Had something to do with the annual cycle of the federal government finishing in September. I always finished the year out there in the rock yard. When I'd drive my rover prototypes out there, they would drive out of Building 9 and immediately condense water. By the time I'd get to the rock yard, they were dripping water, because when you walk outside in August, your glasses fog up. So do your rovers. They fog up pretty quickly, and it was just brutal. So wouldn't it be nice to have an air-conditioned, thermally controlled environment where we would be able to test all day long? And then for the moon side, especially for South Pole operations, we really needed to be able to turn the lights out completely. And at the JSC rock yard, like most of Houston, it never is very dark. The Houston sky is quite bright, and we're going to be able to turn the lights out. Now, some people have asked, could we turn the whole facility into a thermal vac chamber? I don't know, probably not. And could we add a radiation source? And I said, why would I ever want to do that? But we had a lot of funny requests for what we could do. But one thing we can definitely do is turn out the lights and absolutely control lighting, which is going to be very important. And then add lights. A sun equivalent light could be very, very difficult if you were driving. If you've ever driven in West Texas into the sun, you know what I'm talking about. Except on the moon, it'll be probably 10 times worse. So getting our crew, getting all our cameras working with that kind of lighting will be important. Now, down the center of those two giant scapes is the actual building. It's just kind of floating there between the two large bays. And I'll show you a top-down view. So next shot, we're going to zoom in on that central area. And we're calling them, well, they're labs. They're these big labs on the first floor there. But we're calling them garages, because the labs will have these roll-up doors. And when you roll up the door and come out of your lab, you're on the moon on one side. And then there are the Mars garages. So there will be moon garages and Mars garages, and our expectation is these will be the ideal development labs for people building spacesuits or building rovers or surface power systems or comm systems. There is an interesting group of folks that we've met in space medicine who would like to set up maybe a space surface emergency room where we would try out all the possible scenarios for a bad day on the surface. What happens if you fall off the rover, fall down the ladder, get run over by a rover that your buddy's driving for some reason? What are all the possible, you put a rover into a ditch, a crater. How do you get people out who've been injured? All the incapacitated crew scenarios. It would be great to have a space medicine team be a part of that, because that's an extreme version of trauma care, and it's not just the nominal days where we need space medicine, it's also on those extreme days. And so that's the kind of thing that we might see here. And I see a community that would also like to have a regolith lab. One of those garages might be allocated with glove boxes and different kinds of regolith and different test equipment. It's unlikely in that large multi-acre scape I'm going to be able to have high fidelity chemistry of lunar regolith. First, I need 20,000 cubic yards of it. Second, it would be toxic and very lethal. And third, it would probably wipe out the HVAC system in the building. So we're probably going to have to come up with some reasonable compromise for what the regolith material simulants will be out in the scapes. But in one of those garages, we could go all in on very high fidelity and different types of lunar regolith, and then for the Mars side, Mars simulants as well. So that's kind of the idea. We've talked to companies that are interested in leasing these garages. We see NASA as kind of the anchor tenant in having both the garages and kind of a priority out on the Moon and Marscapes. We've talked to the curation folks at JSC who would like to have some space here, as well as the HP program, which runs suit and rover development. We've also talked to some folks at JPL, and where JSC might be the anchor tenant on the Moon side, I think JPL might be the anchor tenant on the Mars side, and that's kind of cool. Get the two J centers together, always a good thing. That's the main focus are these garages. On the second floor, there's kind of the mezzanine level. Every garage has a mezzanine, so your people that are working in the garage can also have some areas, so their offices aren't hundreds of yards away. Over my career, I've been learning about how to build a place for a high-performing team, and so this is like my latest development of how to put a team together. At NASA, I called them bunkers. So I'm upgrading to garages here. Bunkers had a different connotation, but I would put a team in a bunker and kind of close the door, and in a few months come back and find just amazing team results. And how you put a team together and how you design the space is important, and it's something that I've just enjoyed working on in my career. And then the top floor, it could just be these, we call project rooms. We're trying not to overthink them. They could be classrooms or workforce training rooms or labs, or we could break them into offices. We could have mission control rooms if you wanted to lay out an ops team that would be running a scenario out on one of those floors. This is where you could set them up. And initially, they might just be big open spaces that we could come back and reconfigure as we need. Here's some other cross sections and looks. I'm very excited about the facility. I think it could be a really unique and one-of-a-kind worldwide facility, and the kind of thing that will bring people from all around the world to Houston to test their equipment and try out some ideas and to collaborate. And it's going to help position Texas and Houston in particular as the continued center of the universe for space, and that's the way it ought to be. So we've had now multiple workshops where we've looked for use cases in 4 general categories of kind of engineering development, research, training, testing, and more of the science, planetary sciences of mission development and training. We've had vigorous discussions on the combination of human health and space medicine, and developed numerous use cases. And we did this with 3 different workshops. We had an academic group. In College Station, we had 100 faculty from around the state who all came together and kind of reasoned through how they would want to use the facility. Then we had an industry workshop in Clear Lake, actually at the U of H Clear Lake building, where industry helped us flesh out some ideas that professors might not have thought of. And then just most recently, last week in Austin, we held a government workshop. And at that point, I think we've pretty much got a darn good list. There are things that a committee, a group of people can do well. There are a lot of things that groups of people don't do well. Committees don't do well. But one thing a committee can do really well is make a list. Compared to a person, a group, a room full of really smart people can make the most comprehensive list you've ever seen. And after 3 runs at it, I think our list of all the possible use cases for this building is extremely solid, and we are now giving that to the architects and making sure that as we design this building, it's designed to be used. So long list of all the possible things. So those are engineering cases, science uses, thinking through human health, space medicine uses. Again, we had the academic list, the industry list, adding some more things from government. And then similarly for workforce, how we would use this for academia and industry. And we were just identifying the different sources of funds. And I have every expectation that we will have fully leased out the whole building by the time it opens, and then be thinking about how can we add a few more garages in an upgrade to the building. And that's the way it ought to be. So I'll finish with this. This has been kind of our communication plan, and we've now wrapped this up. So we're now diving into more of working on that master plan and coming up with kind of a research taxonomy that will drive the call for proposals. But you see there, we started internally, with all of our faculty at A&M, and then we went outward and met with academics from around the state, and then in industry, and then most recently with government in Austin. I think this is the way to do it. This is an investment by the state. We want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to give us some suggestions and help influence its design, and we're happy to take any feedback that you have or thoughts for the future. With that, I'll just finish there, Dr. Dunbar, if you're okay with that, and I'll take questions or whatever is available time-wise.
Yeah. Since you introduced the next session, what's our timing like?
We're on schedule.
Okay.
Very good.
Let's take a couple questions.
Yes, sir.
Has your relationship with industry or international entities expressed any concern about how they're going to protect their intellectual property?
Yes. So a couple things. The way ITAR is managed, when I've worked in both industry and the government, and if I have a subcontract with somebody, I have to trust them. I count on them. They're required to manage ITAR on their own. Similarly, when I was in the government, we would give a contract to somebody. We would not say, okay, you're going to have us manage all your ITAR. The company, the burden is on the doer, and that's the general approach to management of ITAR. There are a number of aspects of spaceflight that are just inherently ITAR sensitive. For example, pretty much anything involving robotics. So my whole career, I've dealt with ITAR. I've also done a lot of partnerships with companies, and even though it might not be an ITAR issue, there are reasons that companies like to keep their stuff a little private, proprietary. So, we are thinking in these garages, we will have curtains and other ways for the companies to be able to maintain some proprietary.
Yeah, the layout of what you're building looks a lot like you would see in a large aerospace company where they're doing various classified projects for different companies, and the garages are all isolated, 6 ways to Sunday from each other.
Yeah, so we have a facility at Texas A&M where we do classified work, and it's somewhere in between kind of a typical university lab and a national lab. Everything's CUI certified, and I'm familiar with doing that, and have most of my career has been spent with some classified work. But I'm thinking this is probably not going, at least in the near term, not going to have a lot of classified work, but proprietary and ITAR sensitive, absolutely. International participation, I think that was also part of your question. We will have a badging process and a network security process that will be excellent. It will be based on what we do at A&M, which is quite good. But it will not take 6 weeks to get somebody certified to plug in their laptop when they show up at the facility like it does at NASA or any federal facility. It's not NASA's fault. It's just the complications of bringing somebody into a federal network are just more and more complicated. When I was a postdoc at UT Austin, I ran a consortium with A&M, Rice, UT Arlington, and UT, and we connected all of our labs to Building 9 and ran robots in Building 9 from my lab in Austin, and today that would be inconceivable. All the firewall penetrations required to do that would be impossible. But in this facility, we will still be able to make those kinds of connections, and we do expect this building to be digitally connected to university labs all across the state, and we think that's possible.
Well, thanks, Rob. By the way, that was astronaut Bill Shepard over
Yes.
there.
Well-
So you know Bill.
Well, yeah, we've been on a blue sky team together once upon a time, so nice to see you.
Let's
Shep.
give him a round of applause.